He awoke and wanted Mars. The valleys. What would it be like to trudge among them, great and greater yet? The dream grew as he became fully conscious. The dream and the yearning. He could almost feel the enveloping presence of the other world, which only government agents and high officials had seen. A clerk like himself? Not likely. Having descended from the taxi, Douglas Quayle slowly walked across the 3 densely populated foot runnels into the modern, attractively inviting doorway. There he halted, impeding mid-morning traffic, and with caution read the shifting colored neon sign. He had in the past scrutinized the sign before, but never had he gone so close. This was very different. What he did now was something else. Something which sooner or later had to happen. Recall Incorporated. Was this the answer? After all, an illusion, no matter how convincing, remained nothing more than an illusion. At least objectively. But subjectively, quite the opposite entirely. And anyhow, he had an appointment. Within the next 5 minutes. Taking a deep breath of mildly smog, this Chicago air, he walked through the dazzling pyromaniac, shimmering in the doorway, and up to the receptionist's counter. The nicely articulated woman at the counter said pleasantly, "Good morning, Mr. Quayle." "Yes, I'm here to see about recall, of course, as I guess you know." "Yes," the receptionist corrected him. She picked up the receiver of the vidphone by their smooth elbow and sat into it. "Yes, Mr. Douglas Quayle is here." "Mr. McLean, may he come inside now, or is it too soon?" The phone made strange noises. "Yes, Mr. Quayle." "You may go in. Mr. McLean is expecting you." And he started off uncertainly and called after him. "Room D, Mr. Quayle, to your right." After a frustrating but brief moment of being lost, he found the proper room. The door hung open, and inside, at a big genuine walnut desk, sat a genial-looking man, middle-aged, wearing the latest Martian frog paint gray suit. His attire alone would have told Quayle that he had come to the right person. "Sit down, Douglas," McLean said, waving his plump hand toward the chair which faced the desk. "So, you want to have gone to Mars, eh? Very good." Quayle seated himself, feeling tense. "Not so sure this is worth the fee, but it costs a lot, as far as I can see. What do you really get out of this, Mr. Quayle?" "It costs almost as much as going," thought Quayle. "Well, you get tangible proof of the trip, don't you?" McLean said emphatically, "All the proof you'll need. Here, I'll show you." He dug through the drawer of his impressive desk. "Ticket stub." Reaching into a manila folder, he produced a small square of embossed cardboard. "It proves you went, and you returned. Postcards." He laid out 4 franked pictures of 3D full-color postcards in a neatly arranged row on the desk for Quayle to see. "Film shots you took of local sites on Mars with a rented moving camera." And to Quayle he displayed those too. Plus, the names of people you met, 200 postcreds worth of souvenirs, which will arrive from Mars within the following month. And passports, certificates listing the shots you received, and more. He glanced up keenly at Quayle. "You'll know you went, all right. You won't remember us. You won't remember me, or ever having been here. It will be a real trip in your mind. We guarantee that. A full 2 weeks of recall. Every last piddling detail. Remember this. If any time you doubt that you really took an extensive trip to Mars, you can return here and get a full refund, you see? But I didn't go. I wouldn't have gone, no matter what proofs you provide me with." He took a deep breath, unsteady breath. "And I never was a secret agent with Interplan. It seemed impossible to him that Recall Incorporated's extra-factual memory implant would do its job, despite what he had heard people say. Mr. Quayle, as you explained in your letter to us, you have no chance, no possibility in the slightest of ever actually getting to Mars. You can't afford it. And what's much more important, you could never qualify as an undercover agent for Interplan or for anybody else. This is the only way you can achieve your lifelong dream. Am I not correct, sir? You can't be this. You can't actually do this. But you can have been and have done. We see to that. And our fee is reasonable. No hidden charges. He smiled encouragingly. Is an extra factual memory that convincing? More than the real thing, sir. Have you really gone to Mars as an Interplan agent? You would by now have forgotten a great deal. Our analysis of true MIM systems, authentic recollections of major events in a person's life, shows that a variety of detail are very quickly lost to the person. Forever. Part of the package we offer you is such a deep implantation of recall that nothing is forgotten. The packet which is fed to you while you're comatose is the creation of trained experts, men who have spent years on Mars. In every case, we verify details down to the last iota. And you've picked a rather easy, extra-factual system. Had you picked Pluto, or wanted to be Emperor of the Interplanet Alliance, we'd have much more difficulty. And changes would be considerably greater. Reaching into his coat for his wallet, Quayle said, "Okay, it's been my lifelong ambition, so I see I'll never really do it. So I guess I'll have to settle for this. I'll think of it that way. You're not accepting second best. The actual memory with all its ugliness, omissions, ellipses, not to say distortions, that's second best." He accepted the money and pressed a button on the desk. "All right, Mr. Quayle," he said, and the door of his office opened. Two burly men swiftly entered. "You're on your way to Mars as a secret agent. Or rather, you have been on your way. This afternoon at 44 you will arrive back here on Terra. A cab will leave you off at your Canapt. And as I say, you will never remember seeing me or coming here. You won't, in fact, even remember having heard of our existence." His mouth was dry with nervousness. Quayle followed the two technicians from the office. What happened next on them? Will I actually believe I've been to Mars, he wondered. And I'll manage to fully fulfill my lifelong ambitions. He had a strange lingering intuition that something would go wrong. Just what, he didn't know. He would have to wait and find out. The intercom on McLean's desk, which connected with the work area of the firm, buzzed, and a voice said, "Mr. Quayle's under sedation now, sir. Do you want to supervise this one or just let us go ahead?" "It's routine. Go ahead, Lo. I don't think he'll run into any trouble." Programming an artificial memory of a trip to another planet, with or without the added Phillip of secret agent, showed up on the firm's work schedule with a monstrous regularity. In 1 month, he calculated wryly, we must do 12 of these. Earthstats, interplanetary travel to become our bread and butter. "Whatever you say, Mr. McLean." Lowe's voice came, and thereupon the intercom shut off. Going to the vault section of the chamber behind the office, McLean searched for a 3-packet trip to Mars and a 62-packet secret Interplan spy. Finding the 2 packets, he returned with them to his desk. Seated himself comfortably, poured out the contents. Merchandise which would be planted on Quayle's Canapt when the lab technician busied themselves installing false memories. A 1 post-cred Sneaky Pete sidearm, McLean reflected. That's the largest item. Set us back financially the most. Then a pellet-sized transmitter. It could be swallowed if the agent were caught. Codebook that astonishingly resembled the real thing. The firm's models were highly accurately based, whenever possible, on actual U.S. military issue. Odd bits which made no intrinsic sense, but which would be woven until the warp and woof of Quayle's imaginary trip would coincide with his memory. Half an ancient silver 50-cent piece, several quotations from John Donne's sermons, written incorrectly, each on a separate piece of transparent tissue. Thin paper, several match folders, bars on Mars, a stainless steel engraved property of Dome Mars National Subsystem, a wiretapping. Then the intercom buzzed. Mr. McLean, I'm sorry to bother you, but something rather ominous has come up. Maybe it would be better if you were here after all. Quayle's already under sedation. He reacted well to the narcanidine. He's completely unconscious and receptive, but I'll be in. Sensing trouble, McLean left his office, and a moment later he emerged in the work area. On a hygienic bed lay Douglas Quayle, breathing slowly and regularly, his eyes virtually shut. He seemed dimly, but only dimly aware of the two technicians and now McLean himself. Well, there's no space to insert a false memory pattern. Merely drop out 2 weeks of work or something. He's employed as a clerk at the West Coast Immigration Bureau, which is a government agency, so he undoubtedly has 2 weeks vacation within the last year. Just take that and put this in. That ought to do it. Petty details annoyed him, and always would. Well, our problem, Lowe said sharply, is something quite different. He bent over the bed, said to Quayle, "Tell Mr. McLean what you told us." To McLean, he said, "Listen closely." The gray-green eyes of the man lying supine on the bed focused McLean's face. The eyes he observed uneasily had become hard. They had polished, inorganic quality, like semi-precious tumbled stones, and he was not sure he liked what he saw. The brilliance was too cold. "What do you want now? You've broken my cover. Get out of here before I take you all apart, especially you. You're in charge of this counter-operation," Lowe said. "How long were you on Mars?" 1 month, Quayle said gratingly. "And your purpose there?" At last, drawing the words out so they could be stripped of hostility, he said, "Agent of Interplan. I already told you. Did you record everything that's said? Play your vid and tape back for your boss and leave me alone." He shut his eyes then. The hard brilliance ceased. McLean felt instantly a rushing splurge of relief, and Lowe said quietly, "That's a tough man, Mr. McLean." "You won't be. After we arrange for him to lose his memory chain again, he'll be as meek as before." To Quayle, he said, "So this is why you wanted to go to Mars so terribly bad." Without opening his eyes, Quayle said, "I never wanted to go to Mars. I was assigned it. They handed it to me. There I was, stuck. Oh yeah, I admit I was curious about it. Who wouldn't be? What a truth drug you've got here. Brought up things I have absolutely no memory of." He pondered. "Wonder about my wife. Could she be in on it? An interplanned contact keeping an eye on me, to be certain I didn't regain my memory. No wonder she's been so divisive and angry lately. About my wanting to go to Mars, even." Faintly he smiled. The smile of one understanding disappeared almost at once. McLean said, "Please believe me, Mr. Quayle. We stumbled onto this entirely by accident. In this work we do, I believe you." He seemed tired now. The drug was continuing to pull him under, deeper and deeper. "Where did I say I'd been?" "Mars. Hard to remember. I know I'd like to see it. So would everybody else." His voice started to trail off. "Mr. Clerk." Straightening up, Lowe said, "He wants a false memory implanted that corresponds to a trip he actually took, and a false reason which is the real reason. He's telling the truth. He's a long way down the marker line. The trip is very vivid in his mind, at least under sedation, and apparently he doesn't recall it otherwise. Someone probably at a government military science lab erased his unconscious memories. All he knew was going to Mars meant something special to him. And so, being a secret agent, they couldn't erase that. It's not a memory, but a desire. Undoubtedly the same one that motivated him to volunteer for the assignment in the first place. Another technician, Keeler, said to McLean, "Well, what do we do? Graft a false memory pattern over the real memory? There's no telling what the result will be. He might remember some of the genuine trip. The confusion might bring him into a psychotic interlude. He had to hold two opposite premises in the mind simultaneously. And he went to Mars, and then he didn't. That he's a genuine agent for Interplan, and that he's not. And that it's spurious. I think we ought to revive him. Without any false memory implantation. Send him out of here. This is hot." "Agreed," McLean said. A thought came to him. "Can we predict what he'll remember when he comes out of sedation?" "It's impossible to tell. He probably will have some dim, diffused memory of an actual trip now. He'd probably be in a grave doubt about its validity. He'll probably decide our programming slipped a gear tooth, and he'll remember coming here. That wouldn't be erased, unless you want it erased. The less mess with this man, the better I like it. This is nothing for us to fool around with. We've been foolish enough to, or unlucky enough to uncover a genuine Interplan spy who has a cover-up perfect, that up to now even he didn't know what he was able to gather. And the sooner they wash their hands of the man calling himself Douglas Quayle, the better. Are you gonna plant the packets 362 in his conapt? No. Are you going to return him his fee? Half. Why half? Seems to be a good compromise. And as the cab carried him back to the Connaught residential end of Chicago, Douglas Quayle said to himself, "It's sure good to be back on Terra." Already, a month gone, rechecking one's portable oxygen source, then life forms, assuming the modest gray-brown cacti and mauve worms. The Martian fauna he had smuggled from the customs, and after all they posed no menace. They could survive in Earth's heavy atmosphere. Reaching into his coat pocket, he rummaged for the container of Martian mawworms and found an envelope instead. Lifting it, he discovered, to his perplexity, that it contained 570 post-cred, and cred bills of low denominations. Where'd I get this? Didn't I spend every cred I had on my trip? And with the money came a slip of paper marked 1/2 by McLean. And then the date. Today's date. Recall. "Recall what, sir, madam?" the robot driver of the cab inquired. "You have a phone book?" "Certainly, sir, madam." And a slot opened. Slid a microtape phone book of Cook County. It spelled oddly. Quayle said he leafed through the pages of the yellow section. He felt fear. Abiding fear. "Here it is. Take me there. Take me to Recall Incorporated. I changed my mind. I don't want to go home." "Yes, sir, madam. As the case may be." And a moment later, the cab was zipping back in the opposite direction. "May I use your phone?" "Be my guest," the robot driver said, presented a shiny new Emperor 3D color phone to him. He dialed on the Connaught and paused. "I have been to Mars. That's the God's truth. A simulated trip, maybe. By means of one of those artificial, extra-factual, whatever. He never dialed the phone, feeling his face flush. Always the same tone, he said hotly to himself. Always the retort, as if she knows everything. The receptionist was there, when he got to Recall Incorporated. Chic. Started in surprise, then gained masterful control of herself. Oh, hello, Mr. Quayle. How are you? Did you forget something? Yeah. I want the rest of my fee back. Fee? We think you're mistaken, Mr. Quayle. You were here discussing the feasibility of extra-factual trips for you, but as I understand, the trip was not taken. I remember everything, miss. My letter to Recall Incorporated, which stated the whole business. I remember my arrival here, my visit with Mr. McLean, the 2 lab technicians taking me toe and administering the drug to put me out. No wonder the firm had returned half the fee. Mr. Quayle, although you are a minor clerk, you are a good-looking man, and it spoils your features to become angry. If it would make you feel any better, I might call him for you. Felt furious. I remember you. And I remember Mr. McLean's promise that if I remembered my visit to Recall Incorporated, I'd receive my money back in full. Where is Mr. McLean? And after a delay, probably as long as they could manage, he found himself once more seated facing the imposing walnut desk, exactly as he had been an hour or so earlier in the day. Some technique you have. My so-called memory of a trip to Mars as an undercover agent for Interplan is hazy and vague. It's full of contradictions. I clearly remember my dealings here with you people. I ought to take this to the Better Business Bureau. He was burning angry at this point. His sense of being cheated had overwhelmed him. We capitulate, Mr. Quayle. We'll refund your balance for your fee. I'll concede the fact that we did absolutely nothing for you. You didn't provide me with the various artifacts you claimed you would. They would prove to me I had been to Mars. All that song and dance you went into never materialized in anything. Not even a ticket stub, not a postcard, not a passport. Proof of immunization. Listen, Quayle. Suppose I told you. You should just let it go. And he pressed the button on his intercom. Shirley, will you disperse 570 more creds in the form of a cashier's check made out to Douglas Quayle? Thank you. He pressed the button, then glared at Quayle. Presently, the check appeared. The receptionist placed it before McLean and once more vanished out of sight, leaving the 2 men alone, still facing each other across the surface of the massive walnut desk. Let me give you a word of advice. Don't discuss your recent trip to Mars with anyone. What trip? Well, that's the thing. The trip you partially remember. Act as if you don't remember. Pretend it never took place. Don't ask me why. Just take my advice. It'll be better for all of us. He had begun to freely perspire. Now, Mr. Quayle, I have other business, other clients to see. A firm that turns out as bad work as you shouldn't have any clients. He shut the door behind him. On the way home in the cab, Quayle pondered the wording of the letter. Complaint to the Better Business Bureau, Terror Division. As soon as he could get to a typewriter, he started. It was clearly his duty to warn other people. Stay away from Recall Incorporated. When he got back to his Connaught, he seated himself before his Hermes rocket portable, opened the drawer and rummaged for carbon paper, and noticed a small, familiar box. A box which he had carefully filled on Mars with Martian fauna, and later smuggled through customs. Opening the box, he saw to his disbelief 6 dead maw worms and several variety of unicellular life on which the Martian worms fed. The protozoa were dried up, dusty, but he recognized them. It had taken him an entire day picking among the vast dark alien boulders to find them. A wonderful, illuminated journey of discovery. But I didn't go to Mars, he realized. The door closed. A voice behind him said, "Well, That's that. Put up your hands, Quail. And also, please turn around. Face this way. He turned instinctively without raising his hands. The man who faced him wore the plum uniform of the Interplan Police Agency, and his gun appeared to be UN issue. For no other reason, he seemed familiar to Quail, familiar in a blurred, distorted fashion which he could pin down. So jerkily, he raised his hands. You remember your trip to Mars. We know all about your actions today, and all your thoughts. In particular, your very important thoughts on the trip home from Recall Incorporated. He continued to explain. We have a teletransmitter wired within your skull. It keeps us constantly informed. A telepathic transmitter. The use of living plasma has been discovered in Luna. He shuddered with self-aversion. The thing lived inside him, within his own brain, feeding, listening, feeding. And the Interplan Police used them. That had come out even at the Homeo pages. So this is probably true, dismal as it was. Why me? Quail said. What had he done? What had he thought? And what does this have to do with Recall Incorporated? Fundamentally, the Interplan cop said, this has nothing to do with Recall. It's between you and us. He tapped his right ear. I'm still not picking up your processes by way of your cephalic transmitter. In the man's ear, Quail saw a small white plastic plug. So I have to warn you. Anything you think may be held against you. Not that it matters now. You've already thought and spoken yourself into oblivion. What's annoying is the fact that under Narcodyne at Recall Incorporated, you told them, their technicians, and the owner, Mr. McLean, about your little trip. Where you went, for who, some of what you did even. They're very frightened. They wish they had never laid eyes on you, sir. And they're right. Quail said, I never went on any trip. It's a false memory chain, properly planted in me by McLean's technicians. Then he thought of the box, in the desk drawer containing the Martian life forms, and the trouble and hardship he had been gathering. The memory seemed real, the box of life forms. That certainly was real. Unless McLean had planted it. Perhaps this was one of those proofs which McLean had talked guiltily about. The memory of my trip to Mars, he thought, doesn't convince me, but unfortunately has convinced the Interplan Police Agency. They think I really went to Mars. They think I at least partially realize it. We not only know you went to Mars, but we know that you now remember enough to be difficult for us. There's no use expunging your conscious memory of all this. Because if we do, you'll simply show up at Recall Incorporated again and start it over. And we can't do anything about McLean and his operations because we have no jurisdiction over anyone except our own people. Anyhow, McLean, he hasn't committed any crime. He eyed Quail. Nor, technically, of you. You didn't go to Recall Incorporated with the idea of regaining your memory. You weren't, as we realize, for the usual reason people go there, loved by plain, dull people for adventures. Unfortunately, you're not plain. You're not dull. And you've already had too much excitement. And the last thing in the universe you needed was a course from Recall Incorporated. Nothing could have been more lethal for you, for us, for that matter, for McLean. Why is it difficult for you if I remember my trip, my alleged trip, and what I did there? Because, the Interplan harness bull said, what you did was not in accord with our great all-protecting father public image. You did for us but we never do. And you'll presently remember, thanks to Narcodyne, that box of dead worms and algae has been sitting in your desk drawer for 6 months, ever since you got back. And in no time have you shown the slightest curiosity about it. We didn't even know you had it until you remembered it on your way home from recall. Then we came on the double to look for it. You hadn't necessarily. Without any luck, there wasn't any time for us. A second interplan cop joined the first one. The two briefly conferred. Meanwhile, Quay thought rapidly. He did remember more now. The cop had been right about Narcodyne. They, Interplan, probably used it themselves, probably. He knew darn well they did, actually. He had seen them, putting a prisoner on it. Where was that? Somewhere on Terra. Luna. Viewing the image rising from his highly defective but rapidly less so memory, he remembered something else. Their reason for sending him to Mars. The job he had done. No wonder they had expunged his memory. The first of the two cops looked over, breaking off his conversation with his compassion obviously. He had picked up Quayle's thoughts. Well, this is a far worse problem now. As bad as it gets. The cop walked towards Quayle again, covering him with his gun. Son, we've got to kill you. And right away. Nervously, his fellow officer said, Why right away? Can we cart him off to Interplan New York and let them? He knows. Why it has to be right away, the cop said. He too looked nervous now, but Quayle realized that it was an entirely different reason. His memory had been brought back, almost entirely now, and he fully understood the officer's tension. On Mars, Quayle said, I killed a man after getting past 15 bodyguards, some armed with sneaky Pete guns the way you are. He had been trained by Interplan over a 5-year period to be an assassin, a professional killer. He knew ways to take out armed adversaries, such as these two officers. And the one with the ear receiver knew it too. He had moved swiftly enough. The gun fired. But he already moved to one side. At the same time, he chopped down the gun-carrying officer. In an instant, he had a possession of the gun. It was covered in the other. Confused, the officer said, I can pick up your thoughts. Pick my thoughts up, huh? He wants to know what I'm going to do. But I did it anyhow. Half sitting up, the injured officer granted. He would use that gun on you, Sam. I picked that up too. He knows he's finished. And he knows it too. Come on, Quayle. Laboriously grunting with pain, he got shakily to his feet and held out his hand. The gun, he said to Quayle. You can't use it. And if you turn it over to me, I'll guarantee not to kill you. You'll be given a hearing. Someone higher up in Interplan will decide, not me. Maybe they can erase your memory once more, I don't know. But you know the thing I was going to kill you for. I couldn't keep you from remembering it. So my reason for wanting to kill you is in a sense past. Quayle, clutching the gun, bolted from the conapt, sprinted for the elevator. If you follow me, he thought, I'll kill you. So don't. He jabbed at the elevator button, and a moment later the door slid back. The police hadn't followed him. Obviously they had picked up the terse, tense thoughts that had decided not to take a chance with him inside the elevator and started to descend. He had gotten away for a time, but what next? Where could he go? The elevator reached the ground floor. A moment later, Quayle had joined the mob of Peds, hurrying around the runnels. His head ached and he felt sick, but at least he had evaded death. They had come very close to shooting him on the spot, back in his own conapt, and they probably will again, he decided. And when they find me, And with a transmitter inside me, that won't take too long. And ironically, he had gotten exactly what he had asked Recall Incorporated for. Adventure, peril, interplan police work, a secret and dangerous trip to Mars in which his life was at stake. Everything he had wanted as a false memory. The advantage of it being a memory and nothing more could now be appreciated. On a park bench alone, he sat dully watching a flock pass. A semi-bird imported from Mars, 2 moons, capable of soaring flight. Even against Earth's huge gravity. Maybe I can walk my way back to Mars, he pondered. But then what? It would be worse on Mars. The political organization whose leader he had assassinated would spot him the moment he stepped from the ship. He would have Interplan, and them on him too. Can you hear me thinking? He wondered. Easy avenue to paranoia. Sitting here alone, he felt turning in on him, monitoring, recording, discussing. He shivered, rose to his feet, walked aimlessly, his hands deep in his pockets. No matter where I go, he realized, you'll always be with me. As long as I have the device in my head, I'll make a deal with you, he thought to himself, and then to them. Can you imprint a false memory template on me again? As you did before? That I lived an average, routine life, never went to Mars, never saw an Interplan uniform so close, never handled a gun. And suddenly, a voice inside his brain answered. As has been carefully explained to you, that would not be enough. Astonished, he halted. We formally communicated with you in this manner. The voice continued. When we were operating in the field on Mars, it's been months since we've done it. We assumed, in fact, that we'd never have to do so again. Where are you? Walking? To my death? By your officers' guns, he added as an afterthought. How can you be sure it would be enough? Don't the recall techniques work? As we said, if you're given a set of standard, average memories, you get restless. You'd inevitably seek out a recall or one of the competitors again. We can't go through that a second time. Suppose, once my authentic memories have been cancelled, something more vital than standard memories implanted, wouldn't that satisfy the craving? That's been proved. That's probably why you initially hired me. But you ought to be able to come up with something else, something equal. I was the richest man on Terra, but I finally gave all my money to educational sound stations. Or I was a famous deep space explorer. Anything of that sort. Wouldn't one of those work? I mean, try it. Get some of your top-notch military psychiatrists, explore my mind. Try out what my most expansive daydream is. Try it. You'd voluntarily surrender then. If we agree to arrange such a solution. If it's possible, yes. You make the first move. Turn yourself over to us, and we'll investigate that line of possibility. If we can do it, however, if your authentic memories begin to crop up again, as they've done at this time, then we'll have to destroy you. As you must understand, Quill! Do you still want to try? Yes. Because the alternative was death. Now. For certain. At least this way he had a chance. Slim as it was. You present yourself at our main barracks in New York. At 580 Fifth Avenue, floor 12. Once you've surrendered yourself, we'll have our psychiatrists begin on you.
We'll have personality profile tests made. We'll attempt to determine your absolute, ultimate fantasy wish, and then we'll bring you back to Recall Incorporated. Get them in on it, fulfilling that wish in vicarious surrogate retrospection. And good luck. We do owe you something. You did act as a capable instrument for us.
The voice lacked malice. If anything, they, the organization, felt sympathy toward him. Thanks. Quayle began searching for a robot cab. Mr. Quayle. A stern-faced woman. You possess a most interesting wish fulfillment dream fantasy. Probably nothing such as you consciously entertain or suppose. This is commonly the way. I wish it won't upset you too much to hear about it, you know. The senior ranking interplant officer present said briskly, "He better not be too upset to hear about it. Not if he expects to get it shot." Unlike the fantasy of wanting to be an interplan undercover agent, now she was a psychiatrist. She continued, which being relatively speaking a product of maturity, had certain plausibility to it. This production is a grotesque dream of your childhood. It's no wonder you fail to recall it. Your fantasy is this. You're 9 years old, walking alone down a rubble road, a little lane. An unfamiliar variety of space vessel from another star system lands directly in front of you. No one on Earth but you, Mr. Quayle, sees it, and the creatures within are very small and helpless, somewhat on the order of field mice. Although they are attempting to invade Earth, tens of thousands of other ships will soon be on their way, and when this advance party gives you a go-ahead signal, and I suppose I stop them. I suppose single-handed I wipe them out, probably by stepping on them with my foot. No. You halt the invasion, but not by destroying them. Instead, you show them kindness and mercy, and even though, by telepathy, you mode your communications, you know why they had come. They have never seen such humane traits exhibited by any sentient organism. To show their appreciation, they make convent with you. They won't invade Earth as long as I'm alive, Quayle said, growing in strength. Exactly. You can see it does fit the personality despite his feigned scorn. So by merely existing, by simply being alive, I keep Earth safe from alien rule. I'm in effect, then, the most important person on Terra, without lifting a finger. Yes, indeed, sir. And this is the bedrock of your psyche. This is a lifelong childhood fantasy, which without depth and drug therapy you never would have recalled. But it has always existed in you. It went underneath, but never ceased. To McLean, who sat intently listening, the senior police officer said, "And you implant an extra-factual memory pattern. That extreme in him?" And suddenly McLean appeared. We get handed every possible type of wish fantasy there is. Frankly, I've heard a lot worse than this. Certainly we can handle it. 24 hours from now, you won't know what to wish for. Maybe that he'd saved Earth. He'll devoutly believe it really happened. You can start the job then. In preparation, we've already once again erased the memory in him of his trip to Mars. What trip to Mars? But no one answered. Everyone was reluctant. He shelved the question.
And anyhow, a police vehicle had now put in the appearance. He, McLean, and the senior police officer crowded into it. And presently, they were on their way to Chicago. Recall Incorporated. "You better make no errors this time," the police officer said. "I can't see what could go wrong," McLean mumbled. "This has nothing to do with Mars or Interplan. Single-handedly stopping an invasion of Earth from another star system." Wow. What kids dream up. By pious virtue, too, not by force. Sort of quaint. In fact, it's downright touching. But arrogant. Inasmuch as he dies, the invasion will resume. No wonder he doesn't recall it. It's the most grandiose fantasy that I ever came across. When they reached Recall Incorporated, the receptionist Shirley met them breathlessly in the outer office. "Welcome back, Mr. Quayle. I'm sorry everything worked out so badly before. Do we have a packet made up from Mr. McLean?" "I think we do. Packet 81, 20, and 26. 81. Magic healing rod, give him that. A token of gratitude. Documents from the UN Secretary General, thanking him for saving Earth. This isn't precisely appropriate because part of Quayle's fantasy is that no one knows of the invasion except himself. But for the sake of verisimilitude, we'll throw it in." "Writing it down," Shirley said. "This tells us who they were, where they came from, including a detailed star map logging their flight here and the system of origin. Of course, it's in their script, he can't read it, but he remembers them reading it in his own tongue. These should be taken to Quayle's Connacht." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. McLean, I'm sorry to bother you, but something came up. Maybe it would be better if you came in here and supervised like before. Quayle reacted, well, to the narcodyne. He's unconscious, relaxed, receptive, but..." McLean sprinted for the work area. On a hygienic bed, Douglas Quayle lay breathing slowly and regularly. They started interrogating him to find out exactly when to place the fantasy memory of him single-handedly saving Earth, and strange enough, Douglas Quayle mumbled in a dull, drug-saturated voice. "That was the agreement. I wasn't even supposed to remember. How could I forget a event like that? But they gave me a scroll. Gratitude, I have it." Wordlessly, the Interplan officer turned and stalked from the work area. "Might as well put those packets of proof artifacts away," McLean said to himself, resigned. He walked step by step back to his office, including the citation from the UN Secretary General. After all, the real one was probably coming now.